What's up, folks? Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail. Welcome back to another episode of Mondays in Middle Earth, where I read through The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion on my Kindle, leading up to the launch of the Rings of Power. This has also been helping to inform me around a lot of the things around the Rings of Power videos, the ridiculousness of some of the storyline changes they're making, and the things they're inventing. And also just getting me up to speed because I haven't read these books since 2000, 2001, somewhere in that timeline. So it's been a long time since I've read them, over 20 years. We are in the middle of the Two Towers right now, and we're going to be doing Chapter 8, The Road to Isengard, during today's read through. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, now is the time to go do so. We've been going for a few months now since we started with The Hobbit, and we're looking to get through. I would like to say I could get through the Two Towers by the end of August, but I don't think I'm going to finish the full books and the Silmarillion ahead of the Rings of Power. I just don't think that's realistic at this point because it's coming out September 2nd, and there's no way I'm getting through the Two Towers and the Return of the King and the Silmarillion. So this is just going to be an ongoing thing for my channel for the meantime. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and etc. So if you haven't watched previous episodes, now's the time to do so. And of course, as always, don't forget we have a Discord subsection set up in our Discord server if you'd like to talk about this in greater details. Of course, we can always do so here on this video itself. So drop your comments down below. So the Road to Isengard is an interesting chapter because we're coming hot off the heels of the previous Helm's Deep chapter, which, oh my God, was heavy. That was a deep, deep, deep chapter. There was a lot of stuff that went down in that chapter, and just overall heavy on the war. I mean, it was a strategic war chapter. It wasn't. I mean, yeah, it's storyline, but it's just heavy on all the details of war, which I think is where Tolkien's life experiences in World War One really bled into the page. This is the post-war. Um, we get the beginning of this chapter, and it's all the men and heroes who have survived at this point, basically gathering in the post-battle glow of we won, and they're meeting up at the woods, and we see Gimli coming out from the caves, where he's got other of the survivors, which they hadn't seen in a while, with Éomer and etc. And they meet with Gandalf and the rest. Gimli's a little banged up. He's got a bandage around his head, but he's like, I beat you by, I got to 42. The last one had what he said, I think he said a neck iron, and I chipped my axe. And Legolas goes, oh, you beat me by one. Um, it's a really cool camaraderie sequence, which I think probably plays back to the way soldiers would have been having that camaraderie in the trenches. Um, it's a way to keep your chin up, to have that sort of joking going on. Aemir attempts to give Gandalf a compliment right here. He says, you're mighty in wizardry. Thanks so much for helping all this other stuff. And Gandalf just kind of deflects. And I love the way he says it because he says, if I am mighty, I have not shown it yet. I have but given good counsel in peril. Your own valor has done more. But this is kind of like that sequence in the films when, against some powers I have yet to, match myself. You know, eh, they're congratulating Gandalf because he arrived at the last moment and basically saved their butts and brought Erkenbrand with him and everything else. And it was a really cool moment where Gandalf's like, hey, calm yourselves. Thank you, but really it's your own valor that won the day, not me. All I did was ride around on a horse and inspire people, which is fair. He's not yet shown it. But I like the way he said this though. If I am mighty in wizardry, I have not shown it yet. Oh, okay. Everyone wants to know about the trees at this point, and Gandalf's very, he's not giving answers in his wizardly way. He says, "Well, if you want to know more about the trees, you're going to have to come with me to Isengard." And Isengard, why would we go with you to Isengard? We need to do all these other things. Um, but Gandalf basically just tells him, "Well, you need to just, set your men to rebuilding Rohan, but you, King Theoden, need to ride with me. But if you're not going to, look for me here on this day, and that's when I'll see you." And Theoden actually steps up here and says, "No, no, no. I doubted you before. I doubted your counsel in my moment of doubt before Helm's Deep, and you've proven yourself. So I'm not going to doubt you. I will come with you. We'll go to Isengard." So they take a special group of men, obviously including Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn, um, Theoden, and I think it says 20 of his. I didn't write down the exact number. But I think it was 20 of his riders and stuff. But there's an interesting section here where they set the men of Rohan to begin the rebuilding, um, and repairing all the damage. And they take all the prisoners, all these Dunlendings, and tell them that they could repair the evil they have caused if they would simply help to rebuild and then swear an oath to never again pass the fords of Isen nor to march with the enemy's men. Of course, the men of Dunland are amazed by this because in his lies, Saruman had convinced them that the men of Rohan were cruel and burned their enemy captives alive, which just goes to show you the propaganda component of war, which I'm sure Tolkien was very familiar with, but it's something that exists even in the modern era. War propaganda is still like the number one way to convince people that you should go fight because they're different. They're bad, they're evil, and here's why. And if you're not educated, if you don't use your faculties and you don't really educate yourself, you're not going to know that those people are just like you and me. There's that sequence which we haven't gotten to yet, but I know in the films it's the language is a bit reversed, but in the film in any case, when Faramir is giving the speech about the dead Haradrim, and he's like, I don't remember the wording, but something along the lines of, he was just a, here, does he not have a wife and a family, and what 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 was told to him to convince him to come, like, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's that sentiment that, you know, we should have pity on that person because it's still a person, at the end of the day. We don't know what they were told to convince them. As they're passing through the trees here, I find this I don't remember this at all. Legolas is fascinated, like absolutely like obsessed with the trees as they're going through, and he's hearing all the whispers and voices around them, and he's like, oh my god, these are the strangest voices I've ever heard, and I wished I had time to walk among them and hear what they were saying because I feel like in time I could learn. And it's 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 a very interesting sequence, but we also get more banter between Legolas and Gimli here. This is specifically Gimli proceeds to tell him that the men of Rohan have one of the marvels of the northern world in the caves of Helm's Deep, and he claims that they are so beautiful that there would be an endless pilgrims of tourist dwarves merely to gaze at them if such things were known to be. He then tells Legolas that because Legolas is like, nah, it'd be okay. But Gimli's like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, your own halls of Mirkwood, which we dwarves helped you build all those years ago? Yeah, yeah, yeah. The palaces of Mirkwood are he literally uses this word. He says they are hovels compared to the cabins that I have seen here, filled with immeasurable halls and everlasting music of water. And Legolas rebuts this and says, one family of busy dwarves with hammer and chisel might mar more than they make. And Gimli, of course, takes offense to this and says, you don't understand what I'm talking about. My kind would not come in here and mar these caves. They're like beautiful groves of blossoming trees. You don't cut those down in springtime to make firewood. You tend to them and you grow them, and that's what we would do. We would come in and help grow these things into beautiful works of art. And he's so moving in his speech that Legolas finally says, all right, fair enough. He says, I'll tell you what, when we get to the end of all of this, I'll go with you, but first you have to come with me. We'll go see Fanghorn Forest. We'll do a tourism circuit of Fanghorn Forest, and then I'll go with you to these caves. um, and it's just a very cool bonding sequence. But what really got me is as they're leaving the end of the forest here, and they're riding out, Legolas turns around and he sees eyes looking back out at him from the forest. And he's like, I have to ride back and see what those are. And he turns the horse around and he starts to ride towards them. And Gimli's riding with them. And Gimli starts shouting, no, 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 let me get down from this horse. I wish to see no eyes. And Gandalf has to actually chide Legolas and be like, don't go in, Legolas. He uses the exact words. He says, don't go in. It's not your time. Right? Because dangerous. Don't go in there right now. We then see the Ents coming out for the first time, and they start herding the Huorns, the trees away, and everyone, of course, is freaking out because they've never seen them before. Um, this is, Theoden's. What are these? And Gandalf is giving the speech, and Theoden's talking about, he remembers the stories. But it was really cool. If you've never played Lord of the Rings Online, I just recently played this because I just finished up Rohan recently. Um, this sequence in the Lord of the Rings Online MMORPG is exactly like it is in the book. They've even taken a lot of the dialogue from the book. and I live streamed it, and I was nerding out so hardcore. I put a clip up in our Discord because I was like, oh my god, this is like, just you see the Ents coming out and walking past, and Theoden is like, oh, oh my god, and giving this speech about his childhood and the history and the lore and all the mythology. Is really cool. Um, This continues when they make their way to their campsite at night, and it says, around them crept darkness blacker than night, and on both sides of the river it rolled towards them going northward. And Gandalf literally has to calm everyone down and say, draw no weapons, just sit here, wait, and it will pass you by as the trees return to the forest. Um, it's a really cool ending of that sort of sequence of the books. We then get into the valley of Nan Curanir, and we can see the corruption of Sauron because we're told that once was fair and green is now a wilderness of weeds and thorns and smokes and steams and hewn stumps of ancient groves, because he had turned his mind to war and he went away from being caring for the the creatures in the valleys and everything about Middle Earth and was only obsessed with building war machines, and he had cut down all the trees and everything else. I love how the name Orthanc means two different things here. It says it's mentioned here that in Elvish it means Mount Fang, and in the language of the Mark it means cunning mind, but the same word is used in both instances. Of course, we get riding through the valley, and they eventually get to the ring of Orthanc, and we see the water and all the debris and everything else, and we see Merry and Pippin in repose, relaxing after lunch. There's cutlery and pottery all around them as they've just finished lunch. Pippin's passed out, and Mary's like napping while having a smoke. This entire scene, by the way, in the books, in the films, is really well done, even though it's not exactly like it is in the book. But it is a fun in the extended editions the way they've done this. But they obviously greet the hobbits, and there's this section where Theoden's actually saying, "Hey, I've actually heard of your kind before, but with a different name." And he literally says, but I had not heard that they sprouted smoke from their mouths. And Merry begins to give him a history of pipeweed. And Gandalf actually cuts Merry off and tells Theoden, he's like, you do not know your danger if you continue to encourage them down this line of discussion. Because everything related to food and pipecraft and pipeweed and everything else, it's making me laugh a little bit. So, but he then gets a little grumpy and he asks Mary, he's like, did Treebeard give you a message or has plate and bottle driven it from your mind? And of course, they let him know that Treebeard's looking for him and they go off. And this chapter ends with Theoden saying that I would love to speak with you hobbits again after this is all over. I hope you'll come to my hall, at which point we will speak of Tobald the Old and his herb lore and all other things related to hobbits. It's a great chapter. We're down to the last two chapters now of this third book before we get into the Frodo and Sam stuff. Um, I'm going to see if I can't get both of those chapters into the next update. We'll see. But in the meantime, as always, if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, join us in Discord, and stay tuned to the next one. Happy reading. Love to hear your comments down below. Enjoy, everybody.